about Nepal, letters from a sacred mountain place. Letter to Scott from the waterfall on the way to Balhanganda. It's different every moment here. We wake up in a valley with Himal Chuli thousands of feet above us in the distance, and it's amazing how fast we climb. Suddenly, after 1,000 stone steps, we're high above the soy fields where we slept. The children greet us with namaste, mitai, mitai. They want candy, but we let them look through our cameras instead. The girls laugh, and the boys try to take pictures before we pull the camera away. Alice and I are unreliable. We always want to follow a river instead of the trail, but the Sherpas call us back. They don't let anyone get lost. My feet are lined with moleskin, so I can keep walking over these terraces of the imagination. The stones are placed on every river crossing, exactly where my feet need to go. We walk by rows of shoulder-high wheat and shoulder-high wildflowers, morning glories, sunflowers, nasturtiums, though they call them by different names. The names of the towns sound like mantras. Lunch at Nagati, camp at Balhanganda. The names of the mountains sound like states of consciousness. Manaslu, Nagata Chuli, Himal. The rule for taking photos: try to make sure there are mountains in back of everything. The Sherpani before us is singing. 2 yellow butterflies appear out of nowhere. Every time I stop walking and look around, I have to smile. We walk down 1,000 stone steps to a river crossing. A dancer I hike with says they lead to a ballroom of the imagination. I ask her to perform. I wonder how many hands put these stones on the trail, and when. Mi'kmaq Sherpa says Chudara is waterfall. It's a long surprise. Our guide, who is Buddhist, says it's like the mind, changing every moment. He said it should be a verb instead of a noun, nothing substantial, a leap of the imagination, an action, not a thing. Now we are in a small jungle with crickets screaming, and then in a few minutes, we're back on the peaks again, beyond the buzz of conclusions, into the hum of the new. We think we are the ones who are civilized, but Nepal is a place where everyone has a home, even if it's just a wood frame with dried leaves on top. The children are laughing, and people have their emotions right on their faces. A boy leads a small goat through the village. We wave. Namaste, bye-bye, bye-bye, he says. In the distance, a brown boy is leaping over the green rows of soy, a tiny mountain goat unaware of time. The next prose poem is about one of our after-dark hikes. Letter in the Dark from Tadopani Hot Springs. There's a little bit of subtext here that I didn't put in the poem because I didn't know how. It was when I fell off a huge boulder in the pitch dark and screamed at the top of my lungs and scared everyone. That's underneath, but it's not in the poem. Letter in the Dark from Tadopani Hot Springs. He likes to take us hiking at night. We walk down a path with a stream in the middle, turn left behind a tea house, and follow a narrow trail into the dark. We slide down a dirt hill, and then hear the river very close. Now we are climbing over boulders, again in the dark. It's eerie to be in a place so totally foreign. The first mountain poles we find are cold, so we hike longer. He goes ahead and then calls in that high-pitched Nepali animal sound the Sherpas taught him. He flashes his headlamp to show us where. The men take their trousers off, and the women change into bathing suits under their skirts. Now we are all chest high in 1.5 feet of hot water and mud, an unbelievable luxury after 18 days in the mountains. We take our time. We're late for dinner and wash each other's hair. We are a pack of water buffaloes, lazy, peaceful animals. Once you let them into the water, it's very hard to get them out. Stretching out under the water, we can hear the roar of the river and the rocks grinding in the distance. We see the galaxy spread across the sky, billions of stars, and the outline of the valley around us. At the end of a long day of walking, it is delicious just to lie there and look at the stars, which are so large in this part of the world. The air is so clear, the night is so dark and unpredictable. In my dreams, I climb inside a nautilus shell, surrounded by water, back to an earlier part of time. I remember long love nights in the mountains. In the morning, my bed is littered with trilobite fossils. The third poem is Hike to a Secret Field by Gorapani. Today we hiked back up 5,000 feet. It was another strenuous day with wonderful views of the mountains and a running debate with two sides of myself. We've crossed rivers, hiked by waterfalls, and it's hard on the knees. My Buddhist friend rubs them. His hands are full of white heat, and he makes them feel better. Right before Gorapani, there is a steep incline through a forest of roots and rhododendron trees. It's like opening your eyes suddenly in the middle of a fairy tale. In fairy tales, there is always a difficult part to get through. People tend to forget that. We stop in a tea house in Gorapani for tea and French fries, 9 plates. The fire is warm, and the light that flows in through the holes in the wooden window makes us see things differently. We sit on the porch for an hour and watch a small evening storm come and go. Tom wants to keep his favorite campsite secret, so he takes us there in the dark, behind a tea house, through a field, and then up a narrow trail full of roots and boulders until we are here. Pimba flashes his light by our feet, and the Sherpas signal to one another with high-pitched animal sounds. These Sherpas are half mountain goat, half angel. I don't understand what God is yet, but something ecstatic inside keeps me going. Thank you. In the Source article that was published this month, one of the things that Larry said about my poetry is that a lot of it is about relationships and about the ways people succeed and fail at loving each other. In that vein, I'm going to read a poem called Under the Crust of the Huckleberry Pie. It's a poem about someone who had such a strong idea of what he wanted that he couldn't let any real person into his life. By the way, this poem is highly condensed and very imagistic. I think a good way to hear it is just to pretend that you're in the middle of a dream. Under the crust of the huckleberry pie. He wanted to seduce her, but she felt like she was being compared to something invisible. The geometry of a dream, wisteria on the wooden gate, the half-life of plutonium. It wasn't that he didn't love her. He noticed the definition of her legs under the black lace, strong from years of dancing, strong from walking over mountains. They danced after midnight, hips swaying rhythmically to Cajun music, his thumb in the back pocket of her velvet jeans and another woman's smile. He came close to her, like a zebra, before he runs back into the forest, a barn before it burns. with the synchronicity of a spider under the kerosene lamp on the back porch, tulips beside the terracotta swan. He said he wanted more, but held back. The glass sinews of his shoulders, a pattern of vectors in a garden of oxalis. Silver canoes crossing a lake through peacock feathers in a thunderstorm. She covered his wounds with honeysuckle, but he wanted something invisible. Light reflecting off the piano into different shades of silence. She sang to him as they walked through a stand of aspens, the fine strands of his hair gold in the sunlight. She said, I want to cover your mouth with kisses like red leaves falling from a half-open window, with music from a balalaika. But his shoulders were still made of glass. Goodbye then, but if there is a place where people meet between lives, I know I will see you there. Next is a poem about a series of weird coincidences involving insects, and the events always seem to match my psychological state. A poem about insects. After the barn dance in Iowa City, the first of many times we didn't get along, there were cockroaches in my bedroom when I got home. Huge black water bugs of the hardy Midwest variety, hiding in the corners of my bedroom, lounging in the mahogany inlaid box with my jewelry, sliding down the strings of my guitar, and crawling between my sheets instead of you. From that point on, whenever we had a fight or you disappointed me, there was a cockroach in my room, or a nightmare variety spider, large and black. Sometimes I couldn't sleep in my room for days. When you were warm and loving, on nights when you took me to the barn to feed the calves, danced with me or walked with me through fields of high Iowa weeds, holding me close to you, my room was always clear. Just tell him you bug me when he acts like that, a wiser friend advised. It will get this out of your subconscious, and then maybe the insects will disappear. I watched you open and close for 9 months, like a tiger lily who couldn't decide if you wanted to be orange. I planted flowers around my heart while you decided if you loved me. I gave you 20 chances. The night I became convinced that things were over between us, there was a total eclipse of the moon. In the synergy of the event, I got locked out of my apartment and decided to stay at the house of a friend. Of course, the small room she gave me to sleep in was infested. I counted 50 of those little critters, an exotic tropical variety with bright orange stripes on their backs and wings. And even though we hadn't talked about a decision, I knew that we were through. As I slept in a quiet space without dreams, I felt the shadow of the moon across my heart. 2 nights later, I dreamed I was a Cherokee princess and traveled to the lower world in a painted canoe. When I climbed onto the shore, I was greeted by every healer I knew, an entire tribe of medicine men and a snow leopard. As I walked deeper into the forest, I found you by the small fire that you keep alone. You asked me to hold you. You wanted me to love you, which surprised me. You even held my hand when you walked me back to my canoe. But you had to let me go because we live up here, where people aren't as honest about what they need, where fires are too small, where rooms are infested with insects. The next poem is about the birth of the calf. I call it Inseminating the Cows, Part 2. I'm going to read Part 1 when the series moves over to the bistro. The Omen. 4 weeks before the snow came, I saw a calf being born. You called to me, said her time was ready, and ran with me out of the barn to the edge of a field I had never seen before. Her feet were sticking out when we arrived, then the small tongue. In one huge contraction, Ela's tail stood straight up. Then she lay down on the yellow alfalfa grass below a late October sun and pushed her calf out. The calf lay on the ground, not moving, her small eyes open, covered in membrane, and we wondered if she was alive. Ela licked her calf all over with her huge mother's tongue, pushing her over and over with her nose to awaken every cell of her new body. Slowly, the small one pushed through membrane after membrane, became more and more alive, pushed her little head up, moved her legs, fell over, pushed up, fell over, tried to stand, stood up, and looked around with such trusting eyes. We saw the life go in her, breath by breath. You called her Namrita, Sanskrit for good omen. I watched you milk her mother, the muscles of your back rippling, like the hills and valleys of late October. You said Namrita could see, but didn't know what anything was. I watched you fill a bottle with her mother's first milk and feed her. And when you let me hold the bottle, much too big for a human baby, I felt something explode deep inside my body. We slept in the barn that night with 100 yellow roses in a bucket. I couldn't leave the calf alone. It was such a big change for her, coming into this world. Now your strong hands make me remember everything I love about this body. The shepherd on the hills above Jerusalem, the goddess in the Egyptian temple. In the deepest part of my sleep, I come crashing through the border of a new country. A wall of snow falls at my feet. Your hands are full of light. You take your place in the inner circle of my closest friends, half in this world, half at the door of something more. The next poem I'm going to read is my newest poem, and it's a poem that's very important to me. It's called The Seduction of Bathsheba, which is the Hebrew for Bathsheba. It begins with my telling the story of David and Bathsheba from her point of view. I use a lot of imagery from the biblical story, the goats, when Nathan the prophet called David on misusing his king energy, and a lot of the imagery from Israel, where I visited last May. And then the poem evolves into a poem about my relationship with the muse and a reconciliation of the artist and the lover inside of me. I want to dedicate this poem to Victor Phillips, a very dear friend of mine who died a few weeks ago, although that's a funny word to describe what happened. I've been in contact with him a number of times since, and whenever I feel his presence, I'm always filled with light and love. And I'm more convinced than I've ever been that something wonderful happens when you die. The Seduction of Bathsheba. 1. When the king saw her bathing in the watercolor shades of evening, dark skin and white steam rising, scented with hyssop and chamomile, he became obsessed with the way the hills and valleys of her body rose and fell in a sacred dance of falling leaves. In her he worshipped the deep purple of the grape before it is pressed into wine, the bright orange of the lily, the shape of stars, their force fields, and the vectors that connect them to warriors above the hills of Jerusalem. Later, when his servants came for her and her husband disappeared into a flock of goats, the edges of the sunset blurred, purple, dripping, and surprised, over a canvas obsessed with the blue iridescence of tree frogs. At midnight, the king was barefoot on the balcony. pushing his way up through a field of lilies, brown and ochre streets in the distance, azaleas in the alley, goats running madly in all directions. In the beginning, she was married to the muse, but it became hard not to touch him. Even though the goats were running in the opposite direction, brown and ochre in the distance. The summer was voluptuous in its dancing. She gave the muse a tambourine while she painted desert flowers and tree frogs in clay alleys. Sometimes she danced with him, and sometimes by herself after midnight, with delicate silver anklets on her feet. At first, the music of silver against silver was atonal, but it condensed into a pointillist painting in the leaves, transforming the pain into music. Her dreams were half in the ice, half underwater. A Yemenite bride inside a band of scimitars, a sculpture of the whirling energy of emerging leaves. She told the king she would always have two lovers, one emotional and one artistic. But the lover and the artist began dancing, first in small silver steps, later in a love dance of wild leaping. The ice became feathered thin, patterned with feathers. Peacock blue, the color of longing. Green and gold, the color of lucid sleep. The night was translucent with windows as they fell through the borders of flowers, the edges of tambourines, and shabazi music in a wild and feathery leap. She landed the way a prima ballerina floats down to the swans after a lift. His strong, muscular arms guided her to the molecules of paint as they condensed into a landscape that was wildly sensual, vibrantly creative, and very silent. During the eclipse, he lay on his back under eucalyptus trees, watching the shadows condense into tiny points of light shaped like crescent moons. He thought he heard a warning in the tiny crescents of light, the band of shadow, the dark hole in the sky. On the hills above Jerusalem, a prophet was talking to God inside a cloud as the rain condensed into Babylonian cities, a nation in exile. Centuries later, the king's bride is still spinning watercolors out of the edges of her dreams. She is the ballerina with the wild black hair, the Yemenite smile, and Russian dancer eyes. Her people walk across the desert to a city that has her name. Now the desert is blooming. She brushes her lips across the thin membrane of wandering, while the colors flow out in earth tones. Goats graze on the borders of the invisible. Lizards skitter up the crevices of sandstone walls. Tree frogs disappear underwater. She is almost invisible when she dances in the Bedouin market. The blue dye in the teapots, the color of her eyes. Silk scarves and harem pants, the color of desert flowers, ripple like a mirage. But the hills remember earth-tone spices in the open air, the color of her skin. I'm going to read 3 poems about angels. The first is Swimming Upstream. The angel only comes when you need her. She folds her wings over your eyes to take away the pain. You say that I was blind in a past life. My fingers learned to see there. They touch your edges like sculpture, bring you beyond the dark spaces, to the river, swimming upstream in holy water. I dance to connect myself with sun wheels, dream circles, human hands. I take your brown feet back to the desert, a shaman in a circle of feathers, below an adobe sun. When the goddess came, her moonlight was almost blinding. Phoenix feathers and flowers on her face, feet of adobe. I bring you gifts of adobe and touch you with fingers that learn to see in a darker time. The second poem is Video Angel. It's about an angel that appeared on someone's TV in Mount Shasta during the harmonic convergence. There were two major New Age events during my lifetime. The first was Woodstock, and I had 3 opportunities to go, but I just felt like, it was going to be too many people doing drugs, and I wasn't interested in drugs, so I went to my grandma's farm that weekend instead. But when someone offered me a ride to the harmonic convergence, I packed up my tent and my sleeping bag and got in the car. Also, it was the weekend that I met the publisher of my second book, Up in the Mountains, and it began some events that I think led to my moving here. Video Angel. On Mount Shasta, I met somebody I felt I had known for 5,000 years. You've always felt like you're from another planet, he asked me. You are, he said, and I come from the same place. Even my wife doesn't understand. I've been fighting alienation for as long as I can remember. I came to tell you so you wouldn't be so lonely, so you could at least partially understand. But after every failed relationship, I don't understand. During the convergence, there was a video angel on TV. There were skeptics, believers, and people who thought she was just some cheap electronic trick. But if you sang or chanted to her, she got brighter. She even laughed sometimes, and you felt it in your heart. She was the same kind of angel you see in meditation, the kind that comes to lift your burden or heal you when the weight of this planet becomes too great. Like a video trick, she slipped down the antenna, stepping up the current to 30,000 volts and softening it at the same time, translating chrominance and luminance to angel form so everyone could see her. After the weekend, my friend went back to his wife, and I went back to my students and a failing relationship. We planted cactus in our sleep, and they sprouted in our dreams. Later, arms and legs appeared, but we didn't dare to touch this alien creature. Sometimes I remember the planet that we came from. In the small hours of the night, I see the forms and faces, and it fills me with a private joy. Then I feel like a video angel, a celestial electron beam signal spreading her wings in public. People magazine had a different version of the event. There was people were talking about what they really thought was going on out in the street, but I really think it was an angel that just wanted to appear for people whose perception wasn't yet ready to see her. The next poem has an invisible angel at the end, and I think that's the reason it's still important to me. It's called Between Two Languages, and I wrote it when I was healing from an injury. Between two languages. Keeping silent is a tactic, but really I want to talk. In Hebrew, the letters look like animals, or doors to a different life that I won't be going through this time. When I was in Jerusalem, I could not talk because I didn't know the language. The family I stayed with wanted me to marry their eldest son, but I couldn't tell them if I was tired or hungry. I danced with them in the space between two languages. All I want to do in my dreams is dance. If you want to control your dreams, Castaneda says to look at your hands. I choose to fly instead, to take on the body of tiny, delicate animals without gravity. All of my dreams are about breaking rules. I seduce a Chinese friend, which is against his culture. I have dinner with a therapist in the basement. You understand my letters, even though they are in a different language. If I could control my dreams, you'd come and make love to me instead of walking away. I'd abolish distance and the airport. I was up in the air like a bird when he dropped me. My delicate frame could not withstand the impact, and I shattered between two continents. Taking the box of his things out of my house somehow feels better. They feel foreign, like they don't belong to me anymore. My dreams bring me messages. At night, something large and silent wraps itself around me and puts its hand over my heart. Next is a poem I wrote at the beginning of the Persian Gulf War. That was a year ago, but it seems like very, very far away. And I'm of Middle Eastern descent, and I felt a lot of compassion for people on every side of the conflict. And also, I had friends in Tel Aviv who called me from the bomb shelters, literally. So I was very emotionally involved with what was going on. This is a poem in 6 parts. Letters from Tel Aviv during the war. 1. My friend calls from Tel Aviv during the war. He tells me about the sealed room in his small apartment. First the bathroom, then the kitchen, and the air raids late at night, or 2 hours before his dreams are finished in the early morning. Last winter, he found a small oval stone in the ruins of a concentration camp in Austria. He was walking there with school children. If you look at the rock long enough, you can see a face. 2. Halfway around the world, it's my birthday. He steps out from behind the sea turtles and whispers, lean towards the gardenias. Before we dance, he weaves red carnations into my hair. The rosebud on my bed is for later. In the silent place before I dream, he sings about circles. Then we dive. Turtle dreams, underwater. 3. The stone arrives in the mail from Tel Aviv. It makes me remember naked soldiers leaping into the waterfall at En Gedi, their uniforms softly sculptured into leaves on the rocks. In the photograph, he is falling out of the sky, prayer flags attached to his ankles, like a Buddhist monk in a calmer place. He says the birds always whisper to him up there. 4. An American Jewish friend sends me a silver bead and asks me to wear it around my neck on a braided red string. 300 years ago, it was a bullet. He found it in Thailand in a tiny shop by incense offerings to Buddha, almost hidden between hammered silver boxes from the hill tribes in a triangular straw box. The hill tribes collected them after the French soldiers left, and for 300 years they changed a lot of hands. Now, he says, they are symbols of simplicity and the cyclicalness of our lives. He told me he always remembers a lot of red in these shops. Then he said something about endings, but the kind that lead to new beginnings. He says if I wear this bullet, somehow people will remember. 5. I remember traveling in Thailand, walking through a small village on the day of a festival. There was a colorful parade winding down the narrow streets, the scent of exotic spices, rows of food vendors, and dragons jumping from the rooftop. I remembered the stone slab walkway through the temple and the cinnamon robes of the Buddhist monks. My friends were teaching me phrases in Thai and then laughing at my pronunciation. It was the night before a different war. 6. My mother calls late at night after the first Scud missiles hit Tel Aviv. Also friends from San Francisco with news of Ze'ev, Aviva, Yael, Eitan. There was a big chill back in New Jersey. Also a large find of sand dollars on Ocean Beach, a few hundred feet to the right of the Taraville Tunnel. The echo wasn't working properly that day. I know that's a very strange ending, but I guess it's my quirky, imagistic way of saying that I think the whole world has to be out of balance for something like that to happen. The next 3 poems are influenced by Egypt. The first is The Promise. It's a poem that I wrote to someone I haven't met yet. I have a lot of dreams that come true, and I've had a number of dreams that have told me about someone I'm going to meet, but I don't know who he is or where he is. The Promise. I turn on the light and leave the door open, full of roses. But it doesn't seem to be enough, at least not right now. I've been dancing with an invisible partner. My dreams say I will meet him one day. In the pyramids, we were dressed in peacock feathers, a band of gold around his head and mine. When I was sleeping, I felt him hold my heart, but I couldn't see his face. Tonight, I am the question in your pocket. Silent music floating around your heart, denied entry. In a dream, the scent of gardenias, as intoxicating as your body. Yellow as a rose, soft as the light that comes from your hands. In a new season, roses break through the dry and brittle earth, pink and yellow, like an ancient promise. One day they will all be pink. I've been told the one from the pyramids will come to me with a long-stemmed yellow rose, and I will see his face. And the next poem is a Buddhist poem about letting go, filtered through a San Francisco consciousness. It's called Wild Orchids. Wild orchids. I want to think of the men I love like stones I find at the beach, the ones at Año Nuevo, at the private beach, beyond the no trespassing sign. That's where you find the rocks with the seashell fossils, in a secret place. I want to be able to pick them up and put them down without sorrow. Like a wild orchid, I leave where it is growing. That would be the way to let go, like a starfish or a moonshell, curved, spotted like a leopard, floating on a rivulet through the sand, all the way out to the ocean. Letting go the way the Buddhist monks I met high up in the mountains in Nepal taught me. The echo of your face still orbits around me, like a familiar planet. I can't forget the blue-gray of your eyes, full of fear and longing. Your arms reaching for me, out of the center of an Egyptian prayer. Your strong legs with muscles curved like shells, and the no trespassing sign. In the late hours of the evening, I surround myself with words. They fill up with salt water and sing, and they make me strong. I learn so much from my failures that I have to bless them. Sometimes I think we are all intricate patterns of shell inside rock, glowing with the memory of ancient lives. I want to be waist-high in calla lilies, up to my elbows in birds of paradise, orange as the California sun, on a path leading out to the ocean just before sunrise. I want to sing until I forget the meaning of sorrow. is How to Jumpstart a Dream. It's a good poem to read before bed if you want to have a dream that'll heal you or shift you or teach you something. How to Jumpstart a Dream. 1. Rainbow-colored ribbons are rippling in a wind formed by a vortex of dreams. Look for something hanging by a window, a Japanese fern, banners with messages, or lead crystals. Blow into them, create movement, before you dissolve into the vision on the other side. 2. Look for the reflection of tiny stars in an amethyst crystal, and watch the delicate points of light move as you step backwards. Line up geodes at the foot of your bed. Find the color missing from the rainbow, reflected by a hidden light, and follow it until the asteroid particles blur. 3. Follow the images in your photographs into the light of a foreign country. Cross over a suspended bridge to the Kaligandaki River Gorge, or walk on the other side of the river. Follow a row of prayer flags into the air. Pose asymmetrically on top of a mountain in Tibet and follow the spin drift up to the moon. Rub oil scented with jasmine or coconut into your skin. Follow the edges of your elbows and knees, the scent of a balmy wind blowing up from the south. Angels with glass wings will guide you. Ask them questions, even if you can't see them. Use your pinky to trace a spiral on your belly. Listen for melodies in the musical curve in the small of your back. Follow the half moons on both sides of your heart into the sky. 5. Light a beeswax candle inside a tin lantern that reflects snowflakes all over the sky of the silent place where you sleep. Put cinnamon, cardamom, ginger into your midnight tea. Drink it slowly and follow the winding journey of the water as it melts into your body. Let the edges expand into snowflakes as you melt into sleep. 6. Put your left hand softly over the spinning wheel of your heart and fall asleep, loving all the unfinished places of your journey into the unknown. When you wake up, another piece of what you have been searching for will fly into your throat like a radiant yellow bird. Sing back to her before you turn the corner behind the mirror. I have 2 poems about San Francisco, which is my other home when I'm not here. I think I'd like to begin with Geometry of the Neon City. It's a poem about going back for the first time after being here for 2 years and being a tourist in the place where I used to live. And it has an epigram by Jeff Greenwald from Shopping for Buddhas. We go where we need to go and then try to figure out what we're doing there. Geometry of the Neon City. I live on the street with the palm trees in the Mission District, 18 blocks south of the oldest Spanish church in the city, 2 miles west of the Twin Peaks Tower, where the local wino philosophers have predicted the spaceships will come and carry us away if we forget to recycle our garbage. Welcome to Neon City. I am a tourist in the city where I used to live, away from the land of the not-so-sacred cows. Most of my neighbors come from Central America, with a spiral melody of Chinese, Vietnamese, and Filipino. When you go to the market, it's tortillas, tomates, ayote, kabocha, camote. I'd miss too much if I didn't speak Spanish. every part of me that was cramped beneath the stubble fields of the long Midwestern winters is dancing. Hiking at Point Reyes every weekend, spinning counterclockwise at Ashkenaz, seeing all the friends I gathered for the past 10 years, waiting for the fog to clear, having a picnic at Stern Grove before the free Sunday afternoon concerts. Welcome to the geography of calla lilies, the geometry of Dolores Street. Welcome to mango paletas at Latin Freeze after work, up from the underground, across from the Mission 24th Street station. I stay up so late, it makes my telephone number disappear. Last night when my dance partner tried to call, he got an old Japanese woman above a vegetable market. She could barely speak English, but she laughed and laughed. Then she told him she wanted to be reincarnated as a cat. At night, the neon geometry reminds me of a distant planet. Wild and friendly shapes and colors, words in English, Spanish, Japanese, blue cafes, red sushi bars, chartreuse asteroid chips, pink flamingos on neon planetoid rings. Welcome to Neon City, the deep river with the colorful fish of my dreams, the old woman knitting sweaters for everyone she can get her hands on, the local bag lady sleeping on the park bench in front of the toy store. My dance partner gives me an orange and asks me to eat it like a poet. The music dances through him, and he's always dancing for more. He wants me to tell him a story with every sacred atom in my body. I'm trying to find a way to come up with two bodies so I can do everything, and you know it's more than dancing. Welcome to Neon City, palm trees outside my window, on the balmiest street in town, the wind threading the fog around the coconuts, through the branches, dancing all night in a symphony of forgiveness. The process of writing that poem was interesting for me. I carried the images around for several months and I didn't really know what the poem was about until I finished it. The next one is dedicated to the manager of the building where I used to live. And it's about the earthquake and not being there for the earthquake and a group of friends taking care of an old man. The lame man leaning on the mailbox. Old Ed asked his family to send his ashes back to Nebraska, the farmland that he loved. I'd been thinking about showing him photographs of the Midwest, where I live now. The prairie house that I own, my favorite heifer, named after the goddess of the moon. Long rows of mama cows being milked with a spiritual light almost too bright to look at, washing over them from the barn door. I kept thinking I'd go and visit in 2 or 3 days, but I was too late. All of us in the apartment building on Church and 28th remember old Ed leaning on the mailbox, old Belly leaning out over his suspenders, the smiling man, the lame man in front of the toy store window. When I came back to San Francisco that summer, one of my neighbors told me that Ed had been on oxygen for months. It kept getting harder and harder for him to breathe until his last breath was gone. Big Ed used to flirt with all the women in the neighborhood. Brown-skinned Latina teenagers with flowing black hair and designer jeans, winos, widows, old women trekking down the 28th Street Hill to buy groceries every afternoon at the corner store owned by Palestinians. I watched their faces light up under the netting of old hats left over from nightclubs in the 40s. When my mother came to visit me in San Francisco, old Ed fell in love with her instantly. He even had the cockroaches exterminated to impress her. She couldn't walk down the hallway of our building without basking in the moonlight of his toothy smile, the big smile that always came to his face when I mentioned her name. Crusty old man, He used to be a dancer. One afternoon he had to show me. Jitterbug, waltz, tango, dancing sideways down the hall next to the carved banister. For a few moments, my 98 pounds were captive to that huge suspendered body. When his health started to fail, everyone in our building hid it from the management. Even the old nurse with cancer stopped complaining. Michael fixed anything that went wrong in the apartments. During the earthquake, he turned off the water, gas, and electricity for the whole building. He told me he went to every apartment, one by one, to make sure everyone was all right, while his books slid off the shelves and collected in a heap on the floor, large enough for a bonfire, while his plates and silverware rattled out of the cabinets and collided with one another on the way to the floor, while Robin's hot water heater emptied itself and trickled down from apartment to apartment until it flooded the bottom floor. Then he took Ed to the fire station with his oxygen tank so he would be able to breathe in an emergency. We didn't want to risk losing him while all of the other fires were burning. The day I left California, only 8 months before, it was snowing all the way down the coast. It was the first time I'd seen snow for 10 years. And as I was crossing the desert, I had a quiet feeling that I was escaping something terrible. Then I forgot. I would have been in the BART station while my books were crashing into my glass icons and my photographs fell down. Summer in San Francisco. My neighbors told me they didn't want Ed taken to a county home where they'd drug him until he lost his will to live. We all wanted him here with us to tell his corny jokes and complain about our small habits in the torn carpet halls that smelled like my grandfather's first apartment in this country. We lied and told the social workers that everything was all right. Now old Ed is flying. His body is full of light. Smoke and ashes float upwards, white as the snow in the land where he was born. Birds of moonlight surround him now, above the alfalfa fields, where the landscape changes color. I think I'll read maybe 2 or 3 more poems. This was a poem called Waiting for Kore, which is the older name of Persephone. She's the goddess who comes up from the underworld every spring when things get green and vibrant. And according to the patriarchal myths, Kore was seduced and dragged down to the underworld against her will. But according to the matriarchal myths, she got tired of living with Mama all the time and went down to explore the deeper mysteries. Waiting for Kore. I came back to Iowa because I forgot who I was for a while. I thought there might be a secret in the land here. At first I couldn't hear it, but there seemed to be a singing above the dry corn stalks. I thought the old wooden porches could help me remember. I left a dream of boxes inside of boxes. They crowded my knees and my shoulders. They didn't fit me, but I couldn't break them. In the dream you were always leaving. There's never a good reason or a goodbye. You send a postcard saying season's greetings. The words are pre-printed, like your name. I shout after you. I shout from San Francisco to New York. I say you're going to die if you don't get out of your house. I say we all see you getting darker and darker. You don't hear. Someone hides my shoes inside a tree. Feel the earth with your bare feet, he says. It will make you stronger. He shows me the shed where they keep the wheat. I lie down there. The sky is clear enough to see Orion. Perhaps he will be my mirror. His stars lead me deeper. There's a birth god in the green onion. He pushes out from under the earth. His shoots reach up to the sky. I am simple, like the winter corn, waiting to be reborn, wanting to grow again. The next poem is to Isis. It's about the Egyptian goddess of love, healing, and resurrection, and it's about a vision I had at 4 o'clock in the morning. To Isis. You appear in my room at 4 a.m. You have just floated through the wall. It must have been the desire of my tongue for the smooth line of your collarbone. There are photographs in the water, waves to dive under. I tried to keep my memories dry. But what is this music? A flute, primitive, stone houses on the hill, leaves, cherry blossoms of light, warm mist after music. It was only desire, music of arms, flute of tongue on the back of my neck, earth music of the iris to plant again. This is a love poem called Gifts. A small opening between us, in the shadows we reflect on the wall, a heart, a bone. We play tag in the water, and I keep letting him catch me. I show him photographs, dark hair falling past my shoulders, slender legs wrapping around a cello, and he remembers. He points to where I was looking when the music stopped and says, up here. Pale blue jeans, softly sculptured on the floor. I trace the bones, connected like wings, behind his shoulders with my smallest finger. Now I feel the light on my lips. And one final poem, All Alone in the Orchestra, is about the silence in music. The first experience I ever had of transcending an activity was playing music. I think that's why I like doing it so much. All Alone in the Orchestra. A small audience is gathered in the church. A collection of musicians is on the altar, playing Mozart, the velvet and the pulpit pushed aside. I am hanging on to the cello section, the last molecule in the comet's tail. What good does it do me that I can fly right now? I am all alone in the orchestra. I wonder if these church people can see this obvious hermit in black and lace. I could play a wrong note, stand up before the symphony is through. However, we are playing Mozart. I put away my mind's telescope and attempt to focus my attention. I sway back and forth to follow these long notes and try to go where they will take me. I feel the movement in my back, my wrists, my toes. Then the comet in me flies off again. Would anyone like to come along with me? A cellist or an oboe player? Hey you, playing over there, I offer you my secret constellations, the shadows in my corners, the ivy growing all around my mind. I can see you playing every instrument, bass, cello, viola, violin. Your body changes to fit each one. French horn, bassoon, oboe, flute. Your bones mold into every new position. Now I see you play a clarinet. Your spine is made of sparks, around it the rhythm of frantic moths, black and bound together by the night. I see you turn into an owl, a raven, the sky. I feel the tempo of all your small animals. Yes, we are playing Mozart. I'm bound by this essential gravity. I orbit in this space. I haven't missed a 30-second note. I lean into these notes. I sway. I follow where they want to take me. Suddenly, I'm not playing anymore. I want to fly through the body of one of these martyrs of church stained glass. I want to peel off my skin. I could sing a note so high and pure that all of you would break as I sit here quiet in my black and lace, my arms stuck in their angular space, my fingers reaching, and then I'm far away from here. It's snowing and absolutely still inside. My head is an open cage, an amphitheater with skeletons of the winter trees. Silent birds fly out of my skull like a high note on the cello after the bow stops.